So, hello and welcome everyone to our weekly session titled Latest in Bitcoin Tech. And in this session, we go through the Bitcoin Optech newsletter and discuss it among ourselves. And this week, we will be going through newsletter 333, which was published, I guess, 3 days ago, December 13th. 3 days ago. This is one of the lengthiest newsletters that I have seen in the recent times. It has one, two, three, four, five, six, in fact, news articles. It has a weekly feature of a core PR review club with lots of questions. It has a section dedicated to changes to services and client software, four of them. Then selected Q&A from Bitcoin Stack Exchange, three of them. Releases and release candidates, how many? Five of them. Notable code and documentation changes. Five of them, six of them, in fact, no, seven, eight, nine of them. All right. I guess you guys must have figured out by now that it is impossible for us to cover all of this in 60 minutes. So we'll pick and choose. Some topics we'll try and delve into more detail. Some topics we'll try and understand on a surface level. We will definitely go through the PR review club because that is a monthly feature. We will also go through the Bitcoin Q&A Stack Exchange because that is also a monthly feature. And other than that, we'll see. We'll pick and choose what suits our schedule and our interest. So yeah, let's go to the preface quickly. This week's newsletter describes a vulnerability that allowed stealing from old versions of various LN implementations, announces a de-anonymization vulnerability affecting Wasabi and related software, summarizes a post and discussion about LN channel depletion, links to a poll for opinions about selected covenant proposals, describes two types of incentive-based pseudo covenants, and references summaries of the periodic in-person Bitcoin Core developer meeting. Also included are our regular section summarizing a Bitcoin Core PR review club meeting, listing changes to services and client software, linking to popular Bitcoin Stack Exchange questions and answers, announcing new releases and release candidates, and describing notable changes to popular Bitcoin infrastructure software. We will commence as every week with the news section, and we will go through the first news article, which is titled Vulnerability Allowing Theft from LN Channels with Minor Assistance, right? LN here stands for Lightning. So vulnerability allowing theft from Lightning channels with minor assistance. Yeah, minor refers to, we all know, those who mine Bitcoins. Dave Harding announced to Delving Bitcoin a vulnerability he had responsibly disclosed earlier in the year. Old versions of Eclair, LDK, and LND with default settings allowed the party who opened a channel to steal up to 98% of channel value. Core Lightning remains affected if the non-default ignore fee limits configuration option is used. This option's documentation already indicates it is dangerous. So Eclair, LDK, and LND are implementations of the Lightning Network. They are implementations of the Lightning Network. And old versions of Eclair, LDK, and LND with default settings allowed the party who opened a channel to steal up to 98% of the channel value. This is what the vulnerability is, that older versions of these three popular Lightning implementations, Eclair, LDK, and LND, if a user was using default settings, they allowed the party who opened a Lightning channel, to steal up to 98% of the channel value. Core Lightning, which is also known as CLN, is another implementation of the Lightning Network. Core Lightning remains affected, meaning these three implementations, Eclair, LDK, and LND, their older versions are affected, not the latest ones. But as for Core Lightning or CLN, even the newer versions remain affected. How? If the non-default ignore fee limits configuration option is used. Okay, we'll look into what this configuration option is. The name is pretty self-explanatory. Okay, so Eclair, LDK, and LND are implementations of the Lightning Network. Older versions of these three implementations are still vulnerable to this theft attack, while the newer versions are not. The default settings of the older versions are vulnerable, but the default settings of the newer version are not. As for Core Lightning, then it is still vulnerable if somebody is using this ignore fee limits configuration. If somebody using this non-default ignore fee limits configuration. The announcement also described two less severe variants of the vulnerability. All LN implementations listed above attempt to mitigate those additional risks, but a complete solution awaits additional work and package relay channel upgrades and related projects. The vulnerability takes advantage of the LN protocol, allowing an old channel state to commit to more on-chain fees than the fee-paying party controls in the latest state. For example, in a state where Mallory controls 99% of the channel balance, she dedicates 98% of the overall balance to endogenous fee. She then creates a new state that pays only minimal fees and forwards 99% of the channel balance to Bob's tribe. By personally mining the old state that pays 98% to fees, she can capture those fees for herself, reducing the maximum value Bob can receive on chain from his expected 99% to an actual 2%. Mallory can use this method to simultaneously scale from about 3,000 channels per block, with each channel potentially controlled by a different victim, allowing theft of about 3 million USD per block if the average channel value is about 100,000 US dollars. So let's try and understand what this attack is. Okay, the foreground is if everybody here is familiar with how the Lightning Network functions. We know that the state is updated every time a transaction is made. Every time a transaction is made on the Lightning Network, the states are updated. Okay, and every time a new state is updated, the previous state gets revoked. The previous state gets revoked. Okay, so now let's assume a situation where Mallory and Bob have a Lightning channel. Okay, the state of the Lightning channel is such that Mallory has 99% of the channel balance and Bob has only 1%. Okay. Now, Mallory and Bob both sign a commitment transaction with this state. Both sign a commitment transaction with a state where Mallory has 99% of the funds and Bob has 1% of the funds. Right. Now, in this state, all Bob is concerned with is his 1%. He is not concerned with what Mallory does with her 99% stake. Right. What Mallory will do is that Mallory will divert 98% of the overall balance to endogenous fee, right? We are talking about a state where Mallory controls 99% of the channel balance and Bob controls 1% of the channel balance. Okay. Now, out of the 99% that Mallory controls, she dedicates 98% to endogenous fee. What's endogenous fee? Endogenous fee is the fee which is a part of the transaction, right? Exogenous fee is out of band fee, okay, where the fee is not a part of the anatomy of the transaction, meaning you can pay the miner directly uh, in whatever way, shape, or form, right? But endogenous fee is a fee which is a part of the transaction, meaning it is the difference of the inputs and the outputs. Okay. So what Mallory will do is that she controls 99% of the fund. Okay. Now she dedicates 98% of the overall balance to fee, meaning Mallory gets 1%, the miner gets 98%, and Bob gets 1%. Okay. Now the catch here is, okay, now this state is agreed upon, right? Mallory controls 99% of the channel balance, out of which she dedicates 98% to the fee. So 1% belongs to Mallory, 1% belongs to Bob, and 98% goes to the miner. Okay, this is the latest state. Now, after this state, another transaction takes place. Okay, another transaction takes place where Mallory transfers or forwards 99% of the channel balance to Bob. Okay, so let's assume Mallory buys a coffee or whatever. Bob is a vendor, and now Mallory transfers 99% of the channel balance, which was on her side, to Bob's side. All right. Now, what is the latest state? The latest state is that Bob controls 99%. Bob controls 99% and Mallory controls only 1%. Okay. And the previous state where Mallory controlled 99% is now revoked. Okay. But the catch here is that what Mallory will do is Mallory will directly give the old or the revoked state to the miner. Because if Mallory tries to broadcast a revoked commitment transaction to the network, the nodes will reject it. And also Bob's node will detect it. And when Bob's node detects that Mallory is trying to broadcast a revoked commitment transaction, Bob's node will penalize Mallory. So what Mallory will do is that Mallory will collude with the miner and directly send the old state to the miner, and the miner, without having to broadcast the unconfirmed commitment transaction to the network, will add that transaction to its candidate block and start mining it. Okay, and if that transaction gets mined, then what happens? In this situation, we are assuming that Mallory herself could be the miner. What will happen? What will happen is that Mallory will maliciously mine a revoked, an old commitment transaction. Okay, and she will take 99% of the channel balance. Whereas, as per the latest channel state, it's Bob that owns 99% of the channel, all right? It's Bob that owns the 99% of the channel. And if now Bob tries to broadcast this commitment transaction, by the time this commitment transaction gets mined, by the time the HTLC expires and the transaction gets mined, Mallory will already have mined the revoked commitment transaction because she is the miner herself and would have claimed 99% or stolen 99% of the channel balance. Okay. We'll read this once again and summarize it because this is the gist of the entire theft. The vulnerability takes advantage of the LN protocol, allowing an old channel state to commit to more on-chain fees than the fee-paying party controls in the latest state. For example, in a state where Mallory controls 99% of the channel balance, she dedicates 98% of the overall balance to endogenous fees. Right? This is state one, where 99% of the channel balance is with Mallory, 1% of the channel balance is with Bob. Out of the 99% that Mallory owns, she dedicates 98% to the miner. Okay, this is state one. Now the state changes. She then creates a new state that pays only minimal fees and forwards 99% of the channel balance to Bob's side. Okay. Now state two. State two is such that Mallory might purchase some objects from Bob, who let's assume is a vendor, and makes Bob a payment, right? Transfers 99% of the balance to Bob's side. This is state two. However, Mallory will then state one, which is the old and the revoked state in which she controls 99% of the channel balance. Okay, she will send that transaction either to a miner directly without broadcasting it through the network, or she herself might be a miner and she will include that transaction in a candidate block and start mining it. The catch here is that Bob will only be able to penalize Mallory if Mallory broadcasts a revoked and expired commitment transaction through the Bitcoin network. But Mallory here is colluding with the miner. Either she's colluding with the miner or she herself is the miner. So she will not broadcast the revoked commitment transaction. She will not broadcast state one to the network. She will directly ask a miner, or if she herself is a miner, she will directly include that transaction in the candidate block and mining it. So Bob's node will not be able to detect that Mallory has mined the commitment transaction, because a revoked commitment transaction, because that commitment transaction will not be relayed through the network. And this way, what can be the 99% of the channel balance can be stolen. 99% of the channel balance will be stolen. Okay. By personally mining the old state that pays 98% to fees, she can capture those fees for herself, reducing the maximum value Bob can receive on chain from his expected 99% to an actual 2%. Mallory can use this method to simultaneously steal from about 3,000 channels per block, with each channel potentially controlled by a different victim, allowing theft of about 3 million USD per block if the average channel value is about 100,000 US dollars. This here is the gist of what the attack is. Okay, and I covered it twice with as much elaboration as I could. So if anybody has any questions or was not able to comprehend something in this attack, please feel free to unmute yourself and ask a question, or you might even post it in the chat section before we move forward, because this is what it is all about. This is how the attack takes place. No one? All right. Users who become aware of the attack before losing their funds would not have been able to protect themselves by shutting down their LN nodes, as Mallory may have already created the necessary states. Even if the victims attempted to force close their channels in their latest state, example where Bob controls 99% of channel value, Mallory could cause them to lose 98% of channel value by sacrificing 1% of channel value herself. The worst case vulnerability was fixed, and the less severe variants partly mitigated by limiting the maximum amount of channel value that can be dedicated to fees, as fees in an earlier state are still allowed to be higher than the amount of fee-paying party controls in a later state. Some theft is still possible, but the amount is bounded. A complete solution awaits improvements in fully exogenous fee sourcing, such as all states paying the same commitment transaction fee, which depends on robust package relay for CPFP, fee bumping in the Bitcoin P2P protocol, and channel commitment transaction upgrades for LN. So what the mitigation is? The mitigation is that there is an upper bound. There is an upper bound on these implementations: LDK, LND, and Eclair. LDK and LND now have an upper bound to which the fee can be paid for a commitment transaction. As in this example, we saw that 98% of the channel balance is being dedicated towards the minor fee. 98% of the channel balance is being dedicated towards the minor fee, endogenous minor fee, for mining the commitment transaction. And the newer versions of these implementations, eClear, LDK, and LND, now have an upper bound, now have a threshold, a limit to which uh, um, a channel balance can be dedicated to a minor fee in order to circumvent this attack. However, with core lightning, there is this parameter known as ignore fee limits where you can surpass the upper threshold that core lightning specifies. Okay, so even core lightning's default version specifies an upper bound to which a channel balance can be dedicated to the minor fee. However, you can circumvent that, you can bypass that upper threshold by using this parameter ignore fee limits. Okay, so if anybody is using the latest versions of eClear or LDK or LND, then the default settings are such that you are immune to this attack, meaning 98% of the channel balance cannot be dedicated for endogenous fee. However, if somebody is using core lightning and they are using non-default settings and they have enabled ignore fee limits, then it is possible they are still vulnerable to this attack. So this is what the summary or the gist of this vulnerability that has been disclosed is that it is possible in older versions of eClear, LDK, and LND, and even in the newer versions of Core Lightning, as long as this parameter is triggered, that uh, one channel partner can broadcast a revoked commitment transaction and pay a huge amount of endogenous fee, and they can themselves mine that transaction without having to broadcast it across the network. And when the state is changed, they will not broadcast the latest commitment transaction. Rather, they will broadcast an old commitment transaction. And the penalty mechanism works such that when you broadcast an old or an expired or a revoked commitment transaction across the network, that is when your counterparty's node can detect it and penalize it. But here with minor assistance, the malicious attacker is not broadcasting the revoked commitment transaction to the network. Rather, they are directly giving it to minor to include it in their candidate block, or they themselves might be the minor and they might include the transaction in their own candidate block and mine it. And once that transaction has been mined and it's been confirmed, then after that, Bob or the person who's been cheated can do absolutely nothing about this, because even if they broadcast the latest state, by the time the latest state gets confirmed, or even if it gets by the time it gets broadcasted, the malicious attacker would have already mined a revoked commitment transaction and would have stolen the funds. Now the mitigation for it is what? The newer versions of eClear, LDK, and LND have upper bounds uh, to which a channel balance can be dedicated towards the fee. And same goes for Core Lightning, except that there is a non-default parameter, ignore fee limits, where it is possible for somebody to dedicate a huge chunk of the channel balance for a minor fee. However, if this is not triggered, then this vulnerability will not occur even in the newer versions of Core Lightning. As a whole, without going too much into detail, because this I think this article is pretty detailed. There are multiple scenarios. There are three possible scenarios that have been discussed. Whoever would like to go into more detail can refer to this article. It's probably an hour of read and research for whoever would like to go into more details, but obviously outside the purview of our session due to time constraints. So yeah, if anybody has anything to add, anything to share, any questions, please feel free to unmute yourself and speak. And if none, then we can proceed further. Okay. I suggest that we take the PR review club first, okay, because it's a monthly feature, and then we can go to the Bitcoin Stack Exchange questions and answers, okay, because these are monthly features, and then after that we will analyze where do we stand and how much time do we have. Depending upon that, we will choose if you wanna see the release candidates, or maybe we want to take another news article. All right. I hope that works with everyone. Cool. No objection, it seems. Who's this hiker? Bala is the hiker. Okay, somebody posted something. What's a commitment transaction? The commitment transaction is basically the transaction with which you exit or with which you close a lightning channel and you go on the mainnet, right? A lightning channel is an intermediary state, right? Before the lightning channel you are on the mainnet, and after the lightning channel closing you are on the mainnet, right? So the transaction with which you fund the lightning channel, transaction with which you initiate a lightning channel, it's known as funding transaction. And the transaction with which you close a lightning channel and go back on the mainnet, that is known as the commitment transaction. You have committed to the latest state of the lightning channel at which you are willing to go to the mainnet. The transaction with which you close a lightning channel and you go on the mainnet is known as a commitment transaction. Let's take one more news article before we move on, okay? Because we don't know whether we'll be able to come back to this. So let's take one more news article and discuss it, not much in detail, but on the surface at least. De-anonymization vulnerability affecting Wasabi and related software. A developer of Ginger Wallet disclosed a method a CoinJoin coordinator could use to prevent users from gaining any privacy during a CoinJoin. Bitcoin Magazine journalist Shinobi reports that the vulnerability was originally discovered in 2021 by Yuval Kogman and reported to the Wasabi development team along with several other problems. Optech has been aware since mid-2022 that Cogman had serious outstanding concerns with deployed versions of Wasabi, but we neglected to investigate further. We apologize to him and Wasabi users for our failure. So this vulnerability is pertaining a protocol, okay, a coin join protocol, which is known as a Wabi-Sabi, okay. Wasabi is the name of the wallet, but I believe the protocol is known as Wabi-Sabi. Okay, before understanding what this vulnerability is, this is related to a CoinJoin protocol. Let's understand what CoinJoin is, because there might be one or two people among us, maybe even more than them, who might not know what CoinJoin is. And even for those who know what CoinJoin is, let's refresh our memories so that'll help us understand the vulnerability better. Okay, all right. So a CoinJoin is a large Bitcoin transaction which takes inputs from many different users and returns many outputs of identical amounts so that an observer cannot easily determine which outputs belong to which of the participants. CoinJoin provides increased privacy for owners of Bitcoin by breaking the heuristics used by chain analysis companies. CoinJoin transactions obscure ownership of specific pieces of Bitcoin UTXOs. CoinJoin is distinct from mixing services in that CoinJoin operators never take custody of any funds. Users maintain control of their Bitcoin at all times. Check out an example of a CoinJoin transaction on the blockchain here. In order to construct a CoinJoin transaction, users cooperatively contribute inputs to a transaction and receive the same amount of Bitcoin as outputs, all in uniform amounts. For example, if five users input amounts of 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 BTC, there will be five inputs totaling 15 BTC, and there will be 15 outputs, each worth 1 BTC. Since each input is of exactly the same amount, it is impossible to tell which 1 BTC outputs belong to which user. Okay. So there is this science known as blockchain heuristics, okay, and there are companies dedicated to this science. Okay, what do these people do? They basically have algorithms that they use to link UTXOs with their owners, right? Bitcoin is in the Bitcoin's blockchain or the Bitcoin's ledger is anonymous, right? It does not reveal the identity of the users. It does not correlate the transactions that are embedded on the immutable ledger. It does not correlate or link those transactions with the identities of the owners, right? However, there are certain heuristic patterns that have been established. There are certain people who possess expertise in this science or the skill known as blockchain heuristics. What they do is that they observe certain patterns on the blockchain, and they possess expertise in linking UTXOs with their owners. CoinJoin is a mechanism or a protocol that tries to circumvent or break this heuristics pattern. Okay, how is that happening? Usually, what happens is that it's generally one person sending a payment to the other person. That's probably the most common Bitcoin transaction, that person A is sending Bitcoins to person B. Okay. And then there is a change. So there can be multiple inputs, but there is one output that goes to the recipient, and then there is change. This is the most common pattern that you will observe in Bitcoin transactions, that there might be one input or multiple outputs, and there are two outputs. Sorry, there might be multiple inputs or one input, and there'll be two outputs, one for the recipient and one for the miner as the fee. Now, to break this mechanism and to make linking the UTX source with the owners more difficult, we have this protocol known as CoinJoin. What do CoinJoins do? Uh, CoinJoins basically are a mechanism in which multiple users come together and put their inputs in one transaction. Okay, so let's say there's Alice, let's say there's Bob, let's say there's Charlie, let's say there's Dan. All four of them will come together and add their inputs into one transaction. Okay, add their inputs to one transaction, and then there will be multiple outputs from that transaction. Now each output will be of the same value. Each output will be of the same value, so that one output cannot be distinguished from the other output, meaning the amounts cannot be used in any way to link the UTX source with the identities of the owners, right? So here, let's say there are 5 users, that one user puts in 1 BTC, the other puts 2 BTC, the other puts 3 BTC, the other puts 4 BTC, the other puts 5 BTC, right? So we have 15 BTC. We have inputs worth 15 BTC. We will also have outputs worth 15 BTC, but the outputs will not be 1, 2, 3, 4, right? If that would be the case, we will know that the person who put in 1 BTC has taken out 1 BTC, the person who's put in 2 BTC has taken out 2 BTC. We will not do that. We'll have 15 outputs of 1 BTC each, so that it is not possible to link which exact UTXO is claimed by which of these 5 users, right? That is how a coin join works. And I think we have a better diagram somewhere on the internet. I saw it. This. Yeah, see, so 3 people come together and put in their inputs, okay, 0.5 BTC, 0.8 BTC, and 0.3 BTC. Okay, so these are 3 different inputs. They might be owned by one person, they might be owned by different people, okay, but the outputs will always have the same value, 0.8 BTC, 0.8 BTC. This is a coin join transaction. This is a coin join transaction where multiple people or multiple users come together and put their inputs, and the outputs are of the same values, so that the outputs or the UTXOs of the output cannot in any way, shape, or form be linked with the identities of the UTXO owners. That is what a coin join is. A developer of Ginger Wallet disclosed a method a coin join coordinator could use to prevent users from gaining any privacy during a coin join. Bitcoin Magazine journalist Shinobi reports that the vulnerability was originally discovered in 2021 by Yuval Kogman and reported to the Wasabi development team along with several other problems. Optech has been aware since mid-2022 that Cogman had serious outstanding concerns with deployed versions of Wasabi, but we neglected to investigate further. We apologize to him and Wasabi users for our failure. Okay, now without going into too much of detail into what exactly are the cryptographic primitives and cryptographic intricacies of this vulnerability is, because it's a huge article. Okay, so whoever is interested can go and have a read on their own. I will just try and summarize it, get the gist of it on the surface level. What happens is that a coin join protocol goes through multiple rounds. Okay, now firstly, how does this coin join take place? There are multiple ways in which coin joins can be done. The most anonymous way is by utilizing a server or a coordinator. Okay, so the coordinator is nothing but a server. Okay, so multiple users will come together and register their inputs with a coordinator. That coordinator will then do a coin join, and then coordinator will then uh, uh, give corresponding outputs with which the UTX owners can claim. Now, when the inputs are registered, anonymization is of utmost importance. So you don't even want the coordinator to know which UTXO belongs to whom. So you register your inputs to the coordinator and take a token from the coordinator. Okay, I'm trying and creating an analogy. Okay, so you take a token from the coordinator. The coordinator gives you a blinded token. The coordinator gives you a blinded token, and when you want to claim your outputs, you unblind that token. Cryptographically, you unblind that token, and once the token is unblinded, you can link that token to your UTXO and claim it. So even the coordinator does not know which UTXO has been or which output has been claimed by which user. All right. It's if I had to strike a day-to-day analogy, when you go to a bank to deposit money, you get a receipt, right? You get a receipt from the bank, or okay, and that receipt is a proof that you have deposited money with the bank, okay? And when you want to withdraw money, you might use that receipt. It could be in the form of a checkbook, it could be in the form of a debit card, okay, which has a pin. Only you know that pin. Even the manager at the bank doesn't know that pin, or the security guard at the ATM doesn't know that pin. You know that pin, and you use that pin to withdraw your cash. Now, what this vulnerability is about is that the coordinator gives blinded tokens to the CoinJoin participants, so that even the coordinator does not know which output belongs to which user. Okay, because those blinded outputs are uniform. Those blinded outputs are uniform, and that is why even the coordinator cannot distinguish as to which output belongs to or is claimed by which CoinJoin user. Now, due to a vulnerability, what the coordinator can do is that they can give different types of tokens. They can give different types of tokens to different CoinJoin users, right? Even though the tokens are blinded, but they can give different types of tokens to different users. And when the users try to redeem or claim the UTXOs, they can use that type of token that they have given to each CoinJoin participant. They can use it to link the identity of the user with the UTXO, with the UTX. Okay, going a little more into detail, how this works is that every single time an event is triggered, the client validates. Okay, what is the client here? It's a CoinJoin user. It validates every single time an event is triggered by the coordinator. The client validates it. However, the client does not validate previous events. Okay, so there are multiple rounds through which a CoinJoin transaction goes through. When the first event is triggered, okay, the clients or the CoinJoin users validate that event. When the second event is triggered, the clients or the CoinJoin users will validate the second event, but they will not revalidate the first event. They will not revalidate the first event because they have already validated the first event. Using this as an avenue of exploit, what the coordinator or the server can do is that it can manipulate the previous events, the historical events, because the historical events are not being revalidated by the clients, are not being revalidated. Okay, so let's say event A occurred, the coordinator will notify the clients that event A occurred. The clients will verify event A. Then event B occurred. Now the clients know that event A and event B have occurred, but they will validate only event B. Now they will not validate event A. Now let's say event C occurred. So now the clients will only validate event C. It will not again validate event A and event B. The coordinator can use this to manipulate events A and events B, meaning the historical events, and the tokens that it has issued to the CoinJoin participants. It can manipulate those tokens in a manner that it can link the identity of the outputs with the CoinJoin users. Okay. Now, what is the fix to it? The fix to it is that the client side will have to validate each and every event, even the historical events, right? So when event A occurs, the client validates event A. When event B occurs, the client validates event A again and event B to ensure that event A has not been manipulated or changed by the client. All right. So this is a fix to it. So the gist being, what's a CoinJoin transaction? A CoinJoin transaction is a transaction in which multiple users come and register their inputs, and they claim outputs of equal value, so as to not allow or to make it more difficult for heuristics experts to link the identities of UTXO owners with the UTXOs. Okay, now one of the ways in which this CoinJoin is executed is through a coordinator or a server, where the users come and register their inputs. The coordinator issues them blinded tokens. They unblind these tokens, and they use these tokens to claim the funds that belong to them. However, due to a vulnerability which I just mentioned, it is possible that a coordinator can issue different kinds of tokens to different participants in the CoinJoin protocol, and then use that type or that distinction in the type of tokens that it has issued to the CoinJoin users to link the identities of the users with the UTXOs, right? So it basically defeats the purpose. The purpose of CoinJoin is that identity of the users in no way, shape, or form should be linked with UTXOs. But here, the coordinator of the server is acting maliciously and is manipulating the protocol to ensure that the coordinator becomes aware of the identity of the UTXO claimants. All right, this is what the vulnerability is, and this is what this protocol was being affected with. And the mitigation is that the client side will now have to validate each and every event to make sure that the token that was issued by the coordinator is not being changed by it after it has already issued it. Okay, whoever is interested can read in more detail, but that is what we had to share on a higher level. If there are any questions, if there's anything that anybody would like to understand better, please feel free to
Yeah,
unmute yourself now.
yeah, Faisal, I'm joining from mid, so uh, I didn't listen to the entire thing. I'll read through this. But how is Wasabi protocol relevant to Bitcoin Optic here?
It's so. I mean, Ginger Wallet is a new wallet, right? To the best of my knowledge, the Wasabi protocol, the CoinJoin has been banned in a lot of countries. So there's this new wallet known as Ginger Wallet that has adopted the same protocol that Wasabi was working on, the CoinJoin protocol, and I think this protocol is now named as Wabi Sabi. Okay, this protocol is now named as Wabi Sabi. And as you know that the primary reason of a CoinJoin a protocol is to ensure that the identities of the UTXO owners should not be linked with the UTXOs itself. It's to make the life of heuristic experts more difficult. However, there is a vulnerability in this protocol which allows the coordinator or the server that is executing the CoinJoin protocol to issue different type of tokens to different CoinJoin participants, and using those tokens they can link the identity of the end users with the UTXOs. All right. So that is what the vulnerability is, because the clients do not validate historical events. So every single time the CoinJoin protocol goes through multiple rounds, and with every single round a new event is triggered. And when the new event is triggered, the coordinator shares that event with the client, which in this case are the CoinJoin users. Okay. Now every time a new event is triggered, the clients do not validate the previous events. The coordinator can exploit this to manipulate previous events, meaning it can first give a uniform blinded token to all the CoinJoin participants, and when further events occur or during the further round, it can change the tokens that it had issued to the CoinJoin users. And with these changed tokens, because now it has changed the tokens, it has given a different token to each participant in the CoinJoin protocol. It can use those tokens to link the identities of UTXOs with the participants.
Yeah, I fairly understood what you're saying. Like, if a coordinator can be malicious and de-anonymize the users UTXOs, uh, but my question stands like, how is Wasabi CoinJoin protocol coordinator being able to de-anonymize UTXOs? How is this part of Bitcoin
No,
Optech?
no, like this vulnerability has been there for a while, and there have been many people who have been pointing it out. Particularly, the Samurai team was very vocal about it. But I think Optech didn't want to get into all these uh, issues, and they were sort of keeping a step away from it. but um, so, but then I think they now feel that they should have at least objectively investigated the issue and then put it out there so that other adopters of the protocols will be aware of it.
Okay. So, but Mango, I mean, I did not kind of comprehend your question. The Optech newsletter covers latest news in Bitcoin tech. So, how is a CoinJoin protocol, which is a protocol that has to do with Bitcoin tech, not relevant or should not be covered in the Optech newsletter?
Okay, my bad. Like, my assumption was that Optech newsletter was part of Bitcoin Core implementation.
No, 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 no. It covers Lightning, it covers Bitcoin Rust, it covers Bitcoin cryptography, everything that has anything to do with Bitcoin. And I think they even have it mentioned somewhere at the bottom.
Yeah, fair. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. So BDK, it's another implementation of Bitcoin. Then they have Rust Bitcoin, they have LDK, they have Bitcoin Core, everything, mining,
Generally,
everything.
they try to keep a very objective view on things, not opinionated stuffs. And
Mm.
this uh, this argument between Wasabi and Samurai was sort of not very objective. So they, for the longest possible time, they tried to avoid getting into it. But in the process, I think they might have overlooked some serious vulnerabilities in the protocol itself.
I take the same approach. Anyways, there are so many topics about which I have strong views, but yeah, I hold myself back, at least on record. Be a good boy. Right. We'll take this one. What the time? It's 8:46 already. We probably have 20 more minutes with us. So I wanted to, okay, we'll just give 2 to 3 minutes to this poll. Okay, so there's a poll, whoever wants can go through it. This poll was created to know the opinion of Bitcoin developers on soft forks, those of whom who are evaluating soft forks. Having said that, there are also a healthy chunk of developers who are not in favor of governance at all, irrespective of what mechanism is used to activate this software. But those of whom who are either in favor or who are evaluating, this form was created, and there are a lot of developers that participated in this. So you can see OpsCTV, which is Optech template verify, OpCSFS, Optech sig from stack, Optech commit, Op internal key, OpCat, OpCCV, OpVault, OpTXhash, SigHash APO. So these are different opcodes that enable some of them unilaterally, some of them in combination with other unlock covenants. So people were asked about their opinion. Do they prefer it? Some said weak, evaluating, prefer, evaluating. Okay, so yeah, it's like that. From what I can see, the most the most green column I think is the Opsi TV. From what I can see from the naked eyes, the most green column seems to be Opsi TV. But yeah, whoever gets time can go through this. The names of the developers I mentioned, their affiliations, the projects that they are working on, and their opinion of different upvotes. Whoever gets time can go through it. There's not a lot to cover in it, but just a couple of minutes I thought I should spare for it. Cool. Uh, what to do next? Okay, we'll take this PR, 10 minutes for the PR, and then maybe 10 minutes for the Bitcoin stack exchange question and answers. Track and use all potential peers for orphan resolution is a PR by Gloria Zhao that improves the reliability of orphan resolution by letting the node request missing ancestors from all peers instead of just the one that announced the orphan. It does so by indicating M orphan resolution tracker, which is responsible for remembering which peers are candidates for orphan resolution and for scheduling when to make orphan resolution requests. The approach is designed to be bandwidth efficient, to not be vulnerable to censorship, and to load balance between peers. So what are orphan transactions? Orphan transactions are basically transactions that have at least one of their parents missing. So when your node sees an orphan transaction, it puts that transaction in a data structure known as orphanage. It puts that transaction in a data structure known as orphanage, and it queries the node that sent the orphan transaction in the first place for its parent. So if node A sends an orphan transaction to node B, and node B sees that this transaction is orphan, it has one or more parents missing, then it cannot validate the transaction, right? Because if the parents are missing, until and unless you don't validate the parent, you cannot validate the child. So that orphan transaction is of no avail. You cannot validate it in and of itself. You will have to wait for its parent to show up, and only once you're aware of the parent and you validate the parent, can you validate the child. So when you have an orphan transaction which has one or more parents missing, you park that transaction in a data structure known as orphanage, and you query the peer that sent you the orphan transaction in the first place for its parent. And if that peer sends you the parent, then you validate the parent. And if the parent is valid, then you validate the child as well. And if the child is valid as well, then you remove it from the orphanage and you might include it in your mempool if it's eligible to enter the mempool. Okay. So some changes have been made to this mechanism. Earlier, your node would only query that peer which sent you the orphan transaction in the first place. Now your node queries a set of peers. It does not query just one peer. It queries a set of peers, a set of potential peers, uh, for the missing parent of an orphan transaction, right? So if Alice's node sends an orphan transaction to Bob's node, earlier Bob's node would only query Alice's node for the parent of that transaction. But now Bob's node will have a set of peers that it will simultaneously query for the parent of the missing orphan. Okay, so let us just read through this in brief. All right. Transaction orphan resolution is the process that kicks off when we are missing UTXOs to validate an unconfirmed transaction. On master, we request missing parents by TXID. BIP331 also defines a way to explicitly request a transaction's ancestor package. Note that there is a difference between orphan transactions and orphan blocks. Okay. There are a number of known orphan handling problems which have existed for quite some time. While they represent inefficiencies when transactions are relayed individually, these problems are even more relevant in package relay, where the orphanage is a part of a transaction's critical path. Currently, we only attempt to resolve orphans with the peer who provided them. If this doesn't work out, example, they send are not found or don't respond, we do not try again. In fact, we can't because we've already forgotten who else could help, all right? So this is imperative that currently what do? If we see an orphan transaction, we only attempt to resolve orphans with the peer who provided them. If this doesn't work out, example, they send are not found or don't respond, we do not try again. In fact, we can't because we've already forgotten who else could help. The TX request tracker introduced in PR 19988 is the data structure that tracks the hashes of transactions to download and the candidate peers for requesting those transactions. It schedules requests to send, helps avoid duplicate inside transaction requests, and encodes prioritization of peers. In transaction download, outbound peers are preferred over inbound peers, though the TX request tracker does not have internal knowledge of connection directions. The preference is expressed by adding a delay to the announcement entry. In orphan resolution, there are similar reasons for preferring outbound over inbound peers. When a transaction is rejected from or accepted to mempool, we call forget transaction hash on the TX request tracker, indicating that we have successfully downloaded the transaction. Downloading it from a peer from a different peer will not make the transaction valid, so we do not need to keep it around. Okay, so earlier we used to query only the peer which sent us the orphan transaction requesting it for the parent, and if that peer would send a not found message or the peer would not respond, then we would not query any other node. But now we query other nodes, we query other nodes whom we believe might have. I mean, there is a set algorithm to classify those nodes depending upon that information. When we believe that a certain node or a certain set of nodes might possess the missing parent, we query those nodes. We query all those nodes for the missing parent. And even in this mechanism, the outbound nodes are given preference, right? So if you have a set of outbound pairs that you have to query and a set of inbound pairs that you have to query for the missing parent, you give transaction to the outbound pairs, right? When your node sees an orphan transaction, it used to query only the peer that sent that orphan transaction for the parent, but now it will query a list of peers which it believes might have the parent transaction, so that it enhances the possibility or the probability of you finding the parent. And even among the list of peers that you will now query, if there are inbound and outbound both peers, you will give preference to outbound peers for obvious reasons, because you manually in most cases choose your outbound peers, and that is why you have a high level of trust in them. Okay, so this is what this PR changes. There are certain questions related to this PR. We'll go through what those questions are and try and understand what the answers to those questions are. What is orphan resolution? A transaction is referred to as an orphan when the node doesn't have at least one of the transactions the orphan is pending from. Orphan resolution is the process of trying to find these missing transactions. Okay, so when your node sees a transaction that has one or more missing parent, it's an orphan transaction, and the process of trying to find the parent of that transaction is known as orphan resolution. Prior to this PR, what are the steps for orphan resolution? Starting from when we notice that the transaction is missing inputs. When a node receives an orphan transaction, it will request the parent transaction from the same peer that sent the orphan. Other peers aren't actively queried but may still send us the parent. For example, when they announce it via an INV message. So another peer might also send you the missing parent without you having to ask for it, right? Because that's what nodes do. Whenever a node receives a transaction, it validates the transaction and it announces the transaction to all the peers whom it believes might not be having that transaction. So it's possible that you might not query a peer, and despite that, they might send you an inventory message in which they might have the missing parent that you are looking for. Or when they send another orphan with the same missing parent. What are the ways we may fail to resolve an orphan with the peer we request its parents from? What are some reasons this may happen, honest or otherwise? An honest peer may simply have been disconnected, or it may have evicted the parent from its mempool. A malicious peer may just not respond to the request, or it may send a parent with malleated, invalid witness data, which results in the parent having the expected TXID while failing validation. So these are some ways through which orphan resolution might fail. What could be the reasons? That the peer that sent you the orphan may just have disconnected the connection with you, or it may have evicted the parent from its mempool. If it's evicted the parent from its mempool, the parent is not in its memory anymore and it cannot share the parent with you even if you query it for it. Or a malicious peer may just not respond to the request intentionally, or it may send a parent with malleated invalid witness data, which results in the parent having the expected TXID while failing validation, right? So these are a couple of situations in which an honest peer might not give you the missing parent, and these are a couple of situations in which a malicious peer might deprive you of having access to the missing parent. How could an attacker prevent a node from downloading a 1P1C package by exploiting today's orphan resolution behavior? An attacker can announce a malleated, often unsolicited. Once the mediated orphan transaction is accepted in the orphanage, the honest orphan transaction will no longer be accepted because it has the same TXID. This prevents the package from being relayed. Alternatively, an attacker could flood a node with orphan transactions because the orphanage is limited in size and the transactions are evicted randomly. This will affect how well a node can download 1P1C packages. So what are the mechanisms in which an attacker can deprive you of relaying 1P1C package? What's a 1P1C package? It's a truck transaction, also referred to as a V3 transaction. So it's a situation where a parent is paying very low fee. That is why it cannot be broadcasted across the network, but it has a child that pays a higher fee. So the combination of the parent and the child together, which is known as 1P1C, one parent, one child, can be broadcasted across the network together because they pay a cumulative fee which is adequate enough for the nodes to broadcast it across the network. How can a malicious attacker prevent this from happening? There can be multiple avenues. One of them could be that an attacker could malleate the witness data of a orphan transaction. So the TXID of the transaction will remain same, but it will have a malleated witness program. Okay. Now, when the honest transaction comes, the honest transaction will also have the same TXID, right? Because the malleation has happened in the witness data, which does not change the TXID of the orphan transaction. It only changes the WTXID of the orphan transaction. So one of the ways in which an attacker can prevent you from relaying a 1P1C package is that it will broadcast an orphan transaction with an accurate TXID, but it will just malleate the witness data. So when the honest orphan transaction with the same TXID comes to your node, the node will reject it, right? Because the node will never relay two different transactions with the same TXID, or it will not relay a transaction with the same TXID twice. Another mechanism could be an attacking node can flood your orphanage with orphan transactions because the orphanage has a limited size. So there is a limit to which the number of orphan transactions it can accommodate. An attacking node can flood your orphanage and overwhelm it such that there is no place for new orphan transactions to enter or to be admitted in your orphanage. So these are a couple of avenues through which an attacker can prevent you from downloading a 1P1C package. What is the peer's resolution to the problem in the previous question? Instead of adding the orphan's missing parent to the transaction request tracker, the orphan transaction is added to the newly introduced M orphan resolution tracker. This orphan resolution tracker schedules when the parent transaction should be requested from different peers and then adds those requests to the regular transaction request tracker. Attendees suggested and discussed an alternative approach that doesn't require an additional M orphan resolution tracker, and this approach will be investigated further by the author. In this PR, which peers do we identify as potential candidates for orphan resolution and why? All the peers who announced a transaction that turned out to be an orphan transaction are marked as potential candidates for orphan resolution, right? When you're going through the description of the PR, we talked about how there are a list of peers which are shortlisted, which you query. Earlier, you would only query the peer that broadcasted the orphan transaction to you, but now you shortlist a list of peers which will query. Now, what is that parameter? This is the parameter. All the peers who announced a transaction that turned out to be an orphan transaction are marked as potential candidates for orphan resolution. You query all of those peers. What does the node do if a peer announces a transaction that is currently a to be resolved orphan? Instead of adding the transaction to MTX request tracker, the peer is added as an orphan resolution candidate. This helps with preventing attacks such as described in the previous question about 1P, 1C packet censorship. Why we might prefer to resolve orphans with outbound peers over inbound peers? I guess the answer is pretty obvious. Outbound peers are selected by the node and are therefore considered more trustworthy, while outbound peers may be malicious. At least they are much less likely to be specifically targeting our node. These are all the questions pertaining the this PR. So what does this PR do? Uh, Earlier, when your node would see an orphan transaction, it would query only the peer that broadcasted that orphan transaction to you in the first place for its parent. And if that node sends you a not found message, or it does not reply because it's either disconnected or because the parent transaction has been evicted from its mempool, then it would not query any further. But now with the incorporation of this PR, your node will query a list of peers. It will not confine itself to one specific peer, but it will query a list of peers. What are those list of peers? They are all your peers that have announced an orphan transaction to you. It will query all of those peers, requesting them for the parent of the orphan transactions that they have broadcasted. And it will give precedence to outbound peers over inbound peers. All right. Uh, what? It's already 9:03. Let's at least take one question out of these three questions, and probably at 9:05, because we started at 8:05. At 9:05 or 9:07, we will wind it up. And then if you have any question answers or any anecdotes to share, we'll do that. Else we'll wind. So any one of these we'll take. Let's take this one. What is the point of solo mining pools? I recently stumbled upon a solo mining pool. It's a pool for solo miners, but the rewards aren't shared. You only get the full reward if you mine a block. So what's the difference between just mining solo? All right. The questioner says, I can do this myself, right? I can mine solo myself. Why do I need a pool? Okay, the primary reason why people mine with pool is that they share the rewards, right? So even if one person finds a block, they share the reward in proportion of the work that they've done. But if I'm mining with a pool where I don't share the reward with other participants, and if I find the block, I take the entire reward. If I don't find the block, somebody else finds the block, I don't get any share of it. So what's the point in me participating with a pool when the pool is not sharing the rewards with me? The answer is the solo mining pool takes care of tracking unconfirmed transactions and supplying block templates for the solo miners. This allows the solo miners to run only mining hardware without a controller. A controller here is a node, right? So if you don't want to take the burden of running your own Bitcoin node, although it's not a burden, it's a necessity, but some people view it as a burden. For some reason, you don't have resources. Let's say you don't have resources to run your own node. You want to mine, you want to be a Bitcoin miner, but for some reason, you don't have the resources to run your own node. In that case, you can collaborate with a solo mining pool. They will run a node on your behalf. They will create templates, job templates on your behalf, and you can hash those templates. And if you find a block, then you can keep the entire Coinbase reward and the transaction fee, and the pool will take its share of the fee. Okay, that is the gist of it. Do you want to read the entire answer? Yeah, let's read it. It will not take more than 2 to 3 minutes. Seeing your follow-up questions from the comments, let me go into a bit more detail. Think of the Bitcoin miners as participating in a perpetual global lottery to be the author of the next block in the Bitcoin blockchain. Miners enter the lottery each time they hash the block header of a candidate block. About 1 in 5.22 e to the power 23 of these hashed block headers yield a hash that is low enough to indicate that a valid block has been found. When a miner finds a valid block, they publish the corresponding candidate block and extend the Bitcoin blockchain. Miners create candidate blocks by first assembling a block template. picking as many unconfirmed transactions from their mempool as they can fit in a block. They secondly, using this template to derive numerous candidate blocks by changing either the nonce in the block header, parts of the Coinbase transaction that can have arbitrary data, or other changeable parts of the block header. Changing any part of a transaction, the order of transactions or the selection of transaction changes the root in the block header. Anytime even one bit changes in the header, hashing the header will result in a completely new hash, which miners use to quickly try many different candidate blocks. In order to assemble block templates, a miner has to run a full node that keeps the mempool with the pool of unconfirmed transactions waiting to be included in blocks. Generally, the node software is used to create an initial block template. This block template is then provided to the mining hardware, ASICs, which will then generate a hash, quadrillions of candidate blocks per second. Setting up and maintaining a full node to serve as the controller for mining hardware takes more work than many miners are willing to invest, and mining by yourself yields extremely unreliable income. Therefore, many miners outsource the template creation to mining pools, which generally share revenue among all the pool participants according to their contribution to the total hash rate of the pool. Some miners, either confident in their luck or with sufficient hardware at their disposal, choose to instead mine by themselves, not smoothing out revenue per pool, but still outsourcing the block template creation by using so-called solo miners. So the questioner says, why should I mine with a solo mining pool when the pool is not sharing its rewards with me? When if I find a block, I take all the rewards. If I don't find the block, if somebody else who is in a pool, then if they find a block, then I don't get any share of it. So the answer is that what the concept behind these solo mining pools is that those miners that do not have the resources or for whatever reason are not willing to run their own nodes can delegate that work to these mining pools. So these mining pools run nodes on behalf of those solo miners. They create templates to those solo miners and they share those templates with the ASICs of the solo miners. And if the solo miners find a block, then the solo miners can keep all the share of the rewards and share the pool fee with the solo mining pool. So that's the concept of these solo mining pools. That if you don't want to run your own node, if you don't want to create your own templates, and at the same time avail all the benefits of solo mining, that is keeping the entire Coinbase reward plus the block subsidy, then in that case you can collaborate with these solo mining pools. You can just run your miner, and these pools will create job templates for you. And if you find a block, then they will take their share of the fee and you can keep the rest of the block subsidy. Okay. So yeah, time is running out. We won't be able to take anything else. I guess it's 9:05 already. We covered a couple of news articles. The first was about the vulnerability in the older versions of some of the most popular Lightning implementations. Then we talk about de-anonymizing vulnerability in a CoinJoin protocol. We went through the Covenant proposal opinion poll. We talked about the Bitcoin Core peer review club that changes the mechanism of orphan resolution. And we took one question from the Bitcoin Q&A Stack Exchange that talks about the concept of solo mining pools. Maybe we can talk about this. There is this game. The Saving Satoshi website provides interactive education exercises for those new to Bitcoin development. I've not seen this game, but yeah, this is a part of the changes to services client software. So a new game known as Saving Satoshi has been launched, which educates people while they are playing a game. And Proton Wallet users can now RBF their transactions, and there is this Bitcoin script, hence NeoVim plugin for Rust Bitcoin, which shows Bitcoin script state stats for each operation. So you can include the script, I believe, as a dependency or an external package in your Rust projects that will illustrate every step. I'm sorry, that will illustrate every step of the script execution. It look like this. You can import it like this. Where did it go? Where did it go? You can import it. I think I saw it. Anyways, yeah, you can import it basically in your Rust programs and get a visualization of the script stack execution. Yep, that is all I had to share or we had to discuss for this week's Optech newsletter. If anybody has anything to share, ask. then please feel free to do so.